Greetings sailors, and welcome to a short follow-up video to the one I did on the Nueve de Julio. I felt it was worth doing a little follow-up, partly to address some of the comments that had been made. No, I'm not going to pick out anyone's specifically, but there were some generally problematic ones that I kind of wanted to address, and also I wanted to bring up the point, as was brought up in those in those same comments, that the Boise, as we see here, is going to be in the game. In fact, is in the game, and it is utterly identical to the Nueve de Julio. So there is now even less reason to buy the Nueve, knowing the history of it. Of course, the Nueve itself is still going to be in the game. Wargaming have basically said we're aware of the history, but we feel it's a small part of the ship's history, and we don't really see it as an issue. And I am paraphrasing slightly, but I hope I am being fair to Wargaming when I say that's their position, because there was, I don't know, in the midst of this discussion, I made a tweet or two in haste that, I then thought better of the next day, where I wasn't really fair to Wargaming, and I was a bit too snarky about it, and you may have seen that, and I did apologise for that, but still my point remains that I find the inclusion of the Nueve in the game problematic, and a lot of people seem to miss why I found it problematic. So, just to give a very brief recap for those that may not have seen that video, although I expect you have if you're watching this, the Nueve was used post-decommissioning in the mid-70s as essentially a prison ship. It was used as one of those sites that the Argentinian junta, the government of the time, basically disappeared people into. A lot of people were put in prison. A lot of people eventually released from prison, although for some of them it took many years. But tens of thousands died, essentially. A lot of people disappeared into these prisons all around the country and were never seen again. And these were people that were snatched in broad daylight in some cases, or doors kicked down in the middle of the night kind of thing. There's this whole generation of people, these tens of thousands of people that are even today referred to as the disappeared, because they simply vanished and were never seen from again. And although the Dirty War is known as the Dirty War, this was not a war. This was a state, a government, actively perpetrating acts of terror against its own civilian population. And so all of the people that were trying to draw an equivalence between what happened with the Nueve, that this bit of history that it was a part of, and say surface engagements between two combatants in World War II. We had people bring up the Bismarck and the Hood as examples. Yes, those can be seen as tragic losses of life, but those were engagements between the regular armed forces of two nations that were at war. That's not what we're talking about with the history of the Nueve, not at all. International law makes and has made distinctions about these sort of things for, decades in some cases. A lot of stuff came out of World War II for obvious reasons. But even before then, you had the Geneva Convention in place, and probably others, that I'm not thinking of at this moment. But the Geneva Convention is kind of the well-known one, about there being, rules of conduct for how people are treated, how prisoners of war are treated, and how civilian populations should be treated. There have been, way too many instances of those rules of war being broken to count, but as I say, we as humans make distinctions when it comes to these sorts of things. And the leaders of the junta themselves were eventually convicted of nothing less than genocide and crimes against humanity, which they are, some of them, still in prison for today, and probably will be for the remainder of their lives. And I'm sure there are some of them that have died in prison already. So that was my essential point with the Nueve. We're not just talking about another wartime action here. We're not talking about a ship with an unfortunate history like, say, the Indianapolis, where, well, you know, I personally don't particularly approve of the nickname Shark Bait, but it has it for a reason. No, the Nueve was part of something that was really much darker. And to give you the example, the counter-hypothetical that I gave to Wargaming, to Sub-Octavian in particular, I suppose, he was the main person I was having this discussion with in Discord when it was all going back and forth, was that what if the Gneisenau, after it was bombed and damaged so extensively in 1941, and after Hitler decided that, you know, the surface fleet wasn't really worth anything after 1942, and it was decommissioned in 1942, and essentially sat out the rest of the war in the Baltic, not really doing anything, and it'd been mostly repaired by that point as well. What if in some alternate timeline, let's say, this was in fact towed to some other point in the Baltic, and it was used as a barracks ship for some hypothetical concentration camp. Not, you know, directly involved with the business of the concentration camp itself, but used as a barracks ship for the, you know, the guards and personnel and whatever. Would Wargaming have been happy putting that in the game? And let's say that the Gneisenau was put in as the first premium ship representing Germany. Would that have happened, hypothetically, you know, instead of the Tirpitz, with that history? Now, Sub-Octavian did not answer that question. I'm kind of not surprised he didn't, because there really is only one answer as I can see it. I can't see Wargaming in any way, shape or form having been happy with doing that. But if that is the case, then how is the Nueve really much different? We're talking about the same level of heinous crimes against the civilian population, essentially. And although, of course, nothing matches the scale of what Nazi Germany did, the Nueve was still part of a similar purpose. And, you know, I gave examples about what if Tiger tanks, and what if, you know, Panzer SS divisions. Jingles himself actually gave another kind of tanks-based example. What if a specific Type 59 went in the game with markings of a specific unit, and it turned out that unit had been part of the massacre in Tiananmen Square? Would Wargaming have been happy putting that in Will of Tanks? Now, of course, the WoW's devs cannot answer for what the Will of Tanks devs may or may not do, but you see the example there. We're not talking about all Tiger tanks, just as I'm not talking about all of the Brooklyn class ships with the Nueve. I'm talking about a very specific thing. And so really, if you are asking yourself these questions and you're saying, no, I would not be happy with that, then why would you be happy with the Nueve? And really, that's what I wanted to get across. I wanted people to think about it. It does seem like the Nueve is going to be in the game, regardless of the fact that not just myself, you know, other people have expressed their disappointment at Wargaming's decision. I think Wargaming genuinely, just based on the responses I saw, genuinely did not think this would be an issue. I don't think they've come at this from an angle of malice is not the right word, but they're not doing this in some purposely disrespectful way. I think they genuinely thought that people would not have an issue with this, and I think it's taken them a little by surprise that people have, but they've decided to sell it anyway. So what we've come down to really is that it's going to be up to you, the player, whether you decide you want to buy this ship or not, knowing what you know about it. And in part, I did have a rather attention-grabbing title for that last video. I know that it was entirely purposeful, but I want people to know the full history of this ship before they go ahead and buy it. I want people to be able to make an informed decision, which isn't something... No, that's not the right way to put it. I'm not going to say that isn't something Wargaming wants you to do. No, Wargaming isn't going to be advertising that part of the ship's history. Let's put it that way. And you can see why, from a marketing point of view, that they would not advertise that part of the ship's history. But as a community contributor, as a person that plays this game and really very much enjoys this game, I think it's a good idea for people to know what they're buying, what the associations are, what the connotations are, because these things do matter, as I have tried to, through example, point out. So yes, it really does come down to if you're happy buying this thing or not. And it's an interesting ship as a ship to play in-game terms. But the thing is, of course, now there is the Boise, which, as I've said at the top of the video, is exactly identical. So if you want to play it, you can play it without those horrible associations. And for that, I am glad. But I am also still simultaneously disappointed that Wargaming is sticking on this point of selling the Nueve as the Nueve. Especially as I said in that first video, we have plenty of other possible ships they could use for the Brooklyn class ships that were sold to South America. And they have a couple of other ships they could use specifically for Argentina, because there were a fair few comments of people were saying, I'm Argentinian, I'm just happy there's an Argentinian ship in the game. And I've come to think that, although there was also the sister ship of this, the General Belgrano, personally, while I would be fine with it, a lot of people would be fine with it, there would be a certain number of players for whom it wouldn't be just another ship. Just as, the Nueve de Julio isn't just another ship. So, anyway, hopefully I've not rambled on too much. Hopefully I have made myself relatively clear where I stand. And although this is definitely... it's not, as I've said, it's not a thing I think Wargaming have done for any nefarious purpose. No, that's the wrong way to put it again. How did I put it before? Anyway, however I put it before, I'm putting it that way again. I remain disappointed that this is going ahead as a premium ship to be put on sale. I think it's just that bit too far over the line. And although I can't tell people whether to buy it or not, I can at least give you the full information and let you make your own decision. So, I feel like I'm doing my job as a CC in that regard, at least. So, anyway, there might be a few more comments under this video. We'll see. Hopefully you have found it fairly clear, and hopefully I made my point reasonably concisely. This isn't even my first take on this, but I'm confident this is the one. And if you feel I have, you can hit the like button or dislike button as appropriate. You can leave any comments below, as I've said. You can sub to my channel if you haven't already. And, of course, as always, stay tuned for more.